it's the unfortunate burden we all have to carry as a consequence of being born. I think that's why Jordan Peterson says that it's useless, it's pointless to be envious of other people. And he made this example of a young man who is envious of another young man who's driving around in a convertible, and on the passenger seat he has a beautiful blonde woman, and he thinks to himself, wow, I think he has everything figured out, and you're envious of that. But you don't realize that this young man who's in this car had to lie and step on other people on his way to the top, and the woman next to him is a prostitute and has a drug addiction problem, and that's what you're envious of. And he shows that's why it's important not to be envious of people, right? So the purpose of this video and this change of setting is because I want to talk a little bit in a conversational tone, which is something I don't think I was doing in the first 3 videos, about purpose, what it means to live in my purpose as a young adult, especially in this social climate with all this social medias and the digital age completely consuming us, just giving us unrealistic standards to live by, Growing up, I had a lot of questions, and the questions that I had were around existence for some odd reason. And one of the questions I remember most particularly is when I used to ask myself, what would happen if nothing that was created wasn't created? What would be there? If there wasn't God in heaven, what would there be? And if there wasn't heaven or earth or anything that is here, what would there be? I would wreck my brain so bad trying to come up with those questions. But as I grew up, those questions evolved, and I realized, man, we are already here. And I mean, I think those kinds of questions are a bit irrelevant now. But while we were here, the questions that I now ask myself was, why is life fair to some people and unfair to others? And that question was because I looked at life and I saw it unfair. I saw a lot of people suffering, a lot of disadvantages that people didn't cause onto themselves, or a lot of injustices that weren't self-inflicted but were because of nature. Some people being born into a family and their parents die at a young age, and some people born into poverty, some people born into a family where they are disadvantaged in all sorts, born into poverty, and they themselves born with disabilities and lacked any academic or intellectual capacity. And at the opposite side, you see people who are born into wealth. They are born into a family where they have both their parents and a complete nuclear family with grandparents from both sides still alive, and they had intellects. They were quite gifted at school, and for me that felt unfair, and I wondered a lot why life would be so unfair and unjust to so many people. And I realized, I think now, after my many years of living and the experiences, the path of time that I existed in and the trajectory that my life took, I realized that is what purpose is fundamentally. Not my desires, not the things I think will be fun to do, not projects that I set for myself, but that being born and realizing that you have a little project for yourself, and your project is unique to everybody else's, and no one else in this world has your kind of project exactly. And I made it into an analogy that I like to call the birth project. The birth project, in simple terms, is just a project that all of us are gifted with at birth to work on. I think that's what makes life interesting, you know. It makes life interesting because you realize at birth that from the moment you are born and you are aware of your birth and you are aware of your person, the fact that you are alive is when you take on the project, and that's what makes life interesting. You find yourself at a disadvantage and you realize, you look in the outside world, you look around you and you see that, wow, things are different for other people. And I think I want that. I want what that family has. I want what that kid has, and you work towards getting that thing. And as a person who is born sorry and as a person who is born at a place of abundance where your parents are rich and everything seems to be going well, you realize that a lot of the things that you desire are intrinsic. I think that's why Jordan Peterson says that it's useless, it's pointless to be envious of other people. And he made this example of a young man who is envious of another young man who's driving around in a convertible, and on the passenger seat he has a beautiful blonde woman, and he thinks to himself, wow, I think he has everything figured out, and you're envious of that. But you don't realize that this young man who's in this car had to lie and step on other people on his way to the top, and the woman next to him is a prostitute and has a drug addiction problem, and that's what you're envious of. And he shows that's why it's important not to be envious of people. And when I realized that even when I am on the outside looking in, I think, wow, people have everything, they're born with everything, but you don't realize that these same people also have their own little project that they're working in. And in the same analogy that Jordan Peterson speaks of, you realize that this woman, obviously not born with an addiction problem, however, she might be battling with the addiction at the moment, and that's the project she's dealing with now. And the young man may be born into riches and all of that. Maybe his parents' marriage wasn't the best, and he had to struggle a lot of nights with his dad beating up his mom, and that's the project that he had to take on. And he is envious of other things, other people's life as well, and he's dealing with his own thing, and that's the kind of project he's working on as well. That is what I found to be purpose, taking on the Beth project, which unfortunately it's not up for debate whether you want it or not, whether it's something you feel you are ready to take on or not. And it's the unfortunate burden we all have to carry as a consequence of being born. But I think this is something we don't have to completely resent, as I think this is the adventure to life. I think being born with a thing to do not only makes life interesting, but it makes it worth living, because I find myself, especially when I'm in my comfort zone for a long time, I find it boring when I don't have something to do, something interesting, something unpredictable happening in my life. I find life a bit boring, and I think God in heaven saw it fit that it be in this manner, because he sees everything. He sees the scope of life of a particular person completely, and he saw that it wouldn't. I think a lot of people would be. I think it is a motivation for a lot of people to become exactly who their optimal person can be. I think more and more people just work towards being closer and closer to their optimal person, and even though we can't all reach that person where you're just the best person you can ever be, I think it's a good motivation to work towards being a good person. and it's an adventure. It makes life much more adventurous in the same sense, that I have narrated. I think it makes life much more adventurous. And along the journey, we find small projects that we take on that help people. We find jobs, we start businesses. And I think what's important when we take on those things is to see if we are making somebody's life, if not only your life only, but if we're making somebody's life better as well. And yeah, because that was so conversational, I felt that the setting that I had couldn't allow me to just sit and speak in the manner that I'm speaking. So I decided this whole different setup. I hope you appreciated my conversational tone. I hope you appreciate the video, you liked it if you've come this far. So please do consider liking and subscribing and leaving a comment below. And thank you so much for your continuous support in my blogs, in my blog on medium.com, and also on this YouTube video.